and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to look at types of oral narratives. Of course, subsequent videos shall contain any other issue shall raise about oral literature, but for today, due to public demand, let me delve into the types of oral narratives. Welcome. So let's look at the various types of oral narratives that we have, but just before then, we need to understand what basically are oral narratives. So typically, oral narratives are stories passed by word of mouth from one generation to another. If you've been in oral literature lessons, you must have been taught the difference between literature and oral literature. Oral narratives is part of, or we can say oral narratives are a part of the various genres that we have in oral literature. These are the genres that make oral literature stand out. They make it distinct. They make it look totally different from literature itself. That aside, let us now go to see the types of oral narratives that we have. In as far as, of course, our Kenyan oral literature curriculum is concerned, if you are especially a candidate who is waiting to sit your KGCSE or your KCSE, this is for you. Fine, so let's get down to business. So we have each community with its own oral narrative. So communities have their own oral narratives. You find if it's the Kikuyu, the Luos, the Kambas, the Taitas, name it all. Each community will give you its own oral narrative which has been passed from one generation to another. Now, so what are the types? One, we have what we call a myth. Number two, we have what we call legends. Three, we have what we call the etiological or explanatory narratives. Okay, etiological can be spelled two ways. I got a couple of students wondering, is etiological the same as etiological? Yes, there's an alternative spelling for that, and it shall be covered in the subsequent videos. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. We have also the trickster narratives. We have the monster narratives. We have the human narratives. So these are the 6 main types of oral narratives you come across. Now, obviously you would be like, okay, you have told us about the 6 types of oral narratives. Okay, so what are they? How do I tell a myth from a legend? How do I tell an etiological narrative from a trickster narrative, from a monster from a human narrative? So of course we cannot be in a position to cover all of them within this one video session. But of course we are inviting you to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss a single video posted. Our videos, of course, are very organized in the sense that we organize content successively so that you can follow up and revise and even make notes. Our pleasure is to see the Kenyan child excel in English, paper 1, paper 2, paper 3. Yeah, and so if you like this video up to this end, why don't you just hit the subscription button, subscribe, and don't be so selfish again, hit a like button, and why not leave a comment? Leave a comment below there. Of all these 6 types of oral narratives, which one confuses you? Which one do you want us to cover with a lot of demonstrations? Let me know in the comment section. However, for this particular session, let us just briefly look at what a myth is. Okay, so what are myths? A myth is definitely a story that attempts to explain how a particular phenomenon came into existence. In other words, there are stories that attempt to explain how certain processes and their products came into existence. And we now have to really elaborate on that. You know, when we use the word phenomenon, it might make the whole thing very difficult. Let's talk about just a process, a natural process and its byproducts. For example, we talk about human beings being created and then they came into existence together with their, offsprings. How did we come into existence? How did we even reach where we are. So we do have stories which wrestle with that kind of subject matter. They attempt to explain how everything started. Now, for the most part, they may deal with issues such as the origin of a particular community, or as we've mentioned earlier, a natural process. Now, myths usually link the causal factors to gods or other supernatural powers. There is a class of oral narratives which is called the etiological narratives. They tend to resemble the myth, but the distinction between the myth and the etiological narrative is the fact that the etiological narrative, yes, would tend to explain the causal factors, but it may have nothing to do with a supernatural power, and that's the distinction mark. Mark that very carefully if you're a student or if you're generally trying to understand the whole thing about them. So, for example, the story on the origin of death, drawn from the Kalenjin community, is a very good example of a myth. Maybe how does the story go? Okay, I will post the story in the next video, but let me summarize it this way, the way I had it. Don't tell me I read it. I had it. I got a Kalenjin friend of mine who told me about it, and he narrated in Swahili. Well, let me try to translate. Once upon a time, there was drought and famine, and majority of the people were hunters and gatherers. So it happened that the animals left for hunting were very few, so there was competition. Every man was struggling to feed their family. So in the process, the animals for hunting ran out. One day, a group of hunters who had come from an expedition, they were tired, they were drinking water on the river, and then one of them noted that as he was taking water, that there was this beautiful creature that looked like a bird that was staring at him right up. He asked himself, could this be edible? And out of curiosity, he aimed an arrow at the bird. And as soon as the bird was hit by the arrow, it is believed that there was a lot of rumbling of thunder and lightning and heavy rain. And then the hunter who had shot that bird together with the bird itself disappeared, never to be seen again. And from that time on, people began sleeping, some kind of sleeping from which they would not wake up. Of course, they called it sleep, but in essence, later on, it came to be called death. So this is an example of a myth which attempts to explain the origin of death. And you can see here there is that linkage of that supernatural entity that had caused a bird to appear inside that river. So that's it for now. If you're enjoying our lessons, once again, I just remind you before you log out, why don't you be generous enough and hit the subscription button, like us, and by the way, drop a comment. Tell us something about the myth that you know in your community. There is our official email, kissbellservices@proton.me. Just get it there on the dashboard. So you can contact us there. Drop your myth from your community. Post it there, then I'll cover it in this channel next time I'm actually doing a lesson. So you can send me a myth from your community at kissbellservices@proton.me. Sorry, I'm gonna just erase this so that if you misspell an email, it doesn't really reach. So that's the email address. Once again, these lessons are free of charge, so don't get scared. We are not here to scam anyone. So that's kissbellservices@proton.me. That's it for now. Bye. See you.